I was born in the US and I grew up in South Africa. My mom grew up there and still has a lot of family there. And so I've spent my life between those two countries. South Africa is my home. It's where I grew up. But I also went to the US almost every summer in the June, July period. So I've gone to summer camp, family reunions, the whole thing. And so my whole life, I have been very aware of and exposed to American xenophobia and Afrophobia, specifically Black American xenophobia and Afrophobia. And it ranged from the pretty innocuous ignorance like, oh, you're from South Africa. What country in South Africa? Or I've got a friend in Nigeria. Maybe you know him. To things like, I remember a lady we were in a hotel in the line for breakfast. And she asked us if we had had breakfast cereal before. People asked us how we liked getting on a plane to come over to the US, obviously assuming that we could only take plane rides to and from America. And this was also the time that, like, you know, with my cousins who were around our age, there were kind of these running jokes around amongst kids about scratching Africans, feed an African for $1 a day. People would ask my sisters and I why we speak such good English if we're from South Africa. And by the age of 10, I was explaining like, okay, well, we were colonized by the British. And as a result, you know, this is what happened. And when I lived and worked in New York in my 20s, that was obviously a different crowd, a more cosmopolitan crowd. And I had a lot of friends that were, you know, Nigerian American or Jamaican American, people who were from the diaspora. And it became a lot more cool and acceptable, right, to be from the diaspora. But one thing that never ever changed, and maybe other Africans who live in the US can identify with this, like to this day, is there's times when I'm in the US when I'll find myself in a room full of Black Americans and I'm the only person who's not from there, who's got a different accent and a different name. And they will be like zero interest in me, right? No curiosity, no questions. But then I'd witness conversations between two Black people from America. Let's say one is from New York and the other's from Texas or New Orleans. And they will have the most lively conversations about the differences between them, about accents, about food, about music. You know, they have a lot of interest in their differences and in their culture amongst each other. Meanwhile, me, someone who's taken an 18-hour flight from across the world, it's like, ah. So when this whole Tyla discourse flared up, I was like, yep, there it goes again. There's that classic xenophobia, Afrophobia, and just American exceptionalism that I grew up being exposed to. You know, it was that American exceptionalism that gives them the confidence and, dare I say, the gumption to tell someone like Tyla that, oh, since you're in America and this is how we understand race, the way we understand race is correct. And this is how you can engage with Blackness as we understand it. We can be the arbiters of whether you should be honored at the Black Entertainment Awards, whether you should perform, etc., etc. Instead of practicing a curiosity and an openness, like, oh, okay, here's someone who is clearly one of us, but who comes from another part of the world where that has different meanings and connotations. And something else that's important about the way Black Americans have reacted to Tyla is almost this defense, like, she's an outsider that's coming for something that's theirs, that belongs to them. She wants their culture. She wants to take it from them or take over. And that's what xenophobia is at its core, right? It's this fear that outsiders want something you have. And the pushback from South Africans, Africans, other Black people in the diaspora has just been like a constant reminder of like, you guys are not the end all and be all. You are not inherently superior just because you come from this country that sits at the center of the world economy, rightly or wrongly. We like what we've got. We like who we are and we're proud of who we are. And there's nothing about who you guys are that makes you better. And as someone who's from both countries and familiar with both contexts, it's been very interesting for me to watch South Africans get so up in arms when they are getting a taste of their own medicine. South Africans behave like the Americans of the continent. And a great example of that is everything that's happening with this woman right here. She is a culturally Nigerian South African citizen who is being subjected to all kinds of Afrophobic abuse by South Africans who don't think that she should be allowed to compete in a pageant in the country of her birth. They are behaving like this based on their South African exceptionalism that makes them think that they have the right to tell someone who they do not even know how they can and cannot participate in the culture of their country. Does that sound familiar? Just like Americans, South Africans believe that because there's a lot of immigration of Africans from other countries into our country for economic reasons or as refugees, etc., it's because we are somehow inherently better or superior. Both South African and American exceptionalism have their roots in the same thing: ignorance, a lack of exposure. The same way it's very clear to Black people from outside of the US that the Black American experience and culture is not the be-all and end-all that reigns supreme over others. The same thing is also very clear to other Africans. And you can only understand this if you show curiosity and interest and actually learn about other people from outside your context. Something I learned by traveling the African continent and by learning about other Africans is that this is a continent of migration. South Africa aside, Africans move a lot across borders, through each other's countries, through each other's lands. That is just how we are as a people. Yes, South Africa has certain factors that will make it attractive for immigration: our constitution, our economy, the fact that technically we are not in active war, which, you know, look at the stats of how women and children are treated in this country, and even that point is debatable. But that aside, Africans travel. It's what they do. We move, we trade. And when you look at how other African countries interact with each other, you will see that. They know a lot more about each other. They exchange a lot more culturally than we do with other Africans. And I won't go into all the reasons why I think South Africa is more cut off from the rest of the continent. Things like, you know, during apartheid, we were very much sanctioned. Also our geographical location. But as far as excuses for the hatred and the ignorance that South Africans show, those things are just becoming less and less relevant. Especially now that I've witnessed how well and cogently and clearly South Africans were able to gather Americans. You guys know better.